the last 4 weeks, we've been dealing with the consequences of the fire that destroyed our brand new Leopard 50 catamaran, and investigating the steps everyone needs to take for fire protection and to make sure that you're properly covered by your insurance. Your insurance is like your life raft. It has to work properly when a crisis arises.
Welcome guys to another episode of the Barefoot Doctors Sailing episodes. Today we're going to talk about insurance, because this is one of the things which, very much like a life raft, is something you hope you never have to use, but when you do need it, you really need to make sure that it works properly for you. Your finances would be severely damaged if your insurance did not work to pay out the way you needed to be paid out after a major event. So you have to get your insurance right. Before we go on, I'd like to put out a really big thank you to all of our viewers and subscribers. We've had such a great amount of support through this whole process after we lost the boat. We really appreciate it immensely. A quick update on where we are with Ultradash and the claim. This is depressingly similar information. Unfortunately, the process is very, very, very slow. An attorney has now been appointed by my insurer to deal with the claim, so that is one step that had to be done. The investigation hasn't proceeded, nothing more has happened, but it is underway. The investigation from the assessor is pointing away from a fault of the boat, a fault with the electrics. There's been lots of comments about it's your lithium batteries or it's your bow thrusters. Well, we didn't have either, and the boat was being maintained on a regular basis, so it's not the boat's fault as far as I understand. So those people going to buy a boat, the cause of this fire does not appear to be an inherent fault of the boat or the manufacturing. So please do not feel that you don't want to go sailing or don't want to buy a boat because this sort of thing can happen. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be paid out by the insurance company and we will be able to go on and move on to another boat in due course. So this will be part one of the insurance issue, and insurance is so important to every boat owner if they want to protect their asset. And as you can all see, things can happen very quickly and you do need insurance, and you do need to have the right insurance. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The first big question people ask is, how do I get insurance? Now, if you've had a boat before, you've probably gone through it before, so let's talk about this as if you are a brand new first-time boat owner and you need to get insurance. The first step you need to do is to work out what kind of sailing you're going to be doing and where you're going to be going, because for you to get insurance, they will want to know that. So in your own head, you have to have made those plans, have that plan in place so that you will be able to write down your information about what you're going to do with your boat and where you're going to sail, at least for the next 12 months, because insurance cycles are 12 months at a time. The next thing you need to do is to actually write down on a sheet of paper all your boating experience or your sailing experience. You do not have to have owned a boat before to get boat insurance. The insurer will look at what experience you've had personally and make a judgment on whether they are willing or not willing to insure you and what your risk to them is. They're trying to assess risk, and they will charge you more money if they think you have more risk. And on this document, you need to put all the experience you've had. It's not just about the boats you've owned. Have you learnt on dinghies? Have you done 10 years dinghy sailing? Have you crewed on other boats? Have you chartered boats? Don't forget stuff, because if you forget stuff, you won't get credit of that experience that you've had. The more experience you can show them that you've had, the more likely they are to insure you, and the better your premiums are likely to be. I've been told by yacht brokers that the insurers will value sailing experience more highly than certification from training organizations, because a lot of the training courses are land-based and it's the experience on the water that gives you more real life experience. Both are valuable and both are good. The more time you've got on the water, the better. This certainly goes back to reinforcing what I said a few videos ago about choosing your own boat and getting some time on the water on the boats you're thinking about. By doing that, you will get both the improvement in your understanding of what boat you will be happy with, but it's also improving your chances of getting cheaper or insurance for your boat in the future. Having decided what you're going to do with your boat and written out your sailing resume, the next thing to do is to find a broker. So the question is, how do you choose a broker? Now, I did make a mistake when we were looking for the Leopard insurance, because I thought each broker was actually had their own insurance companies behind them. But in fact, all the brokers are dealing with the limited number of insurers that are out there, and apparently there are only about 5 companies that insure cruising yachts. So the important thing is to find a broker who you get on with, that you can communicate with. And the best way to find this out is to call them up and have a quick chat, a 10-minute talk about what you're looking for and how they can help. If you're happy with that person, then send them the information so that they can find the best deal for you, and they can talk to you about how to present your qualifications in the best way possible so that you can get that insurance. So the broker will then contact the different insurers, and often they know who to contact directly and who will not get insurance, and they will come back to you with a variety of different quotes. The first thing you will see will be the price, and a common question is, how much does yacht insurance cost? Now, for normal low-risk insurance cover, you pay about 1% of your boat value. But if you are going to be sailing down into the cyclone areas in the non-cyclone season, then your insurance is usually up to 1.5% or 2%, as well as that sort of level if you're crossing the larger oceans. So that's why it's so important, before you ask for the insurance, to let the broker know exactly what you're going to be doing, because to get the quote, he needs to know where you're going to be sailing for the next 12 months. So while you're discussing with your broker what kind of insurance cover you want, he will go through with you the different types of things that are covered. So there is insurance covering 3 main areas. The one is your boat and its fittings and fixtures. There is personal property, and then there is liability insurance. So the personal property includes your tender, your personal items on the boat, any gear like fishing gear, scuba gear, personal effects, whether it be photographic equipment or high value items, computers, etc. And also they do provide medical cover for injuries that occur while you're sailing as well, usually for emergency treatment only. In the liability cover, the liabilities are things like if you do damage to other people's boats, or if you do damage to other people themselves. So there's both the personal and the property type liability. And the third big one is the pollution or wreck recovery type of cover. Now, before this fire, I hadn't even looked at the pollution cover. In fact, I didn't even realize the pollution cover was on there, because I would have looked down and just ignored it because I thought, well, that doesn't affect me. The lessons coming out of my experience here is that you do need to take more care about what's in your policy and what are the inclusions and what are the exclusions. So my cover included almost $1 million worth of pollution cover. So that means when the wreck was at the bottom of the Dania Canal and there was the threat of pollution from my diesel or the chemicals in the boat, there was up to $1 million worth of costs that could be claimed for that recovery. Now, the other reason that that was very good is if I didn't have that pollution cover and wreck recovery cover, then the cost of recovering the wreck would have been taken out of the payout of the boat that they gave me. So if my boat was worth $1 million and the wreck recovery cost $300,000, I would only get the $700,000 minus my deductible as well. So you can see how, without proper cover, you start losing out at every turn that you take. Now, when you talk about the value of your boat, the broker again will sort this out with you, but you either have an agreed value for the boat or a market value for the boat. When you're dealing with a new boat like we were, it's very easy because the boat values the boat's value. It's a new boat, therefore it's not going to devalue significantly. But if you have a 5 or a 10-year-old boat, if they insure for an agreed value, then they will want to have a survey done to confirm the value of the boat in its current condition. If you only have market value on your insurance, then the insurer will make their own judgment on what market value is for a 5-year-old Leopard or a 8-year-old Lagoon or whatever type of boat it is. And that puts you as the owner at significantly more risk. So if it's possible, I would always encourage you to get agreed value, not market value, because when it's market value, you really don't know what they're going to come up with when the time comes. So get the boat surveyed, get an agreed value so you know what you're insured for and you can rest easier at night. So another thing that's occasionally asked for, but it will be asked for if you are going to be sailing and staying in cyclone-prone areas, is the insurer will want you to have a hurricane plan in place. This lays out all the details of how you're going to look after your boat if a cyclone is named, or that's a hurricane is named, where you're going to take the boat, how you're going to secure it, and what precautions you're going to put in place. So it's not too complicated, but just takes a bit of forethought. But you have to know where you're going to take the boat, where you're going to put it, and have those things ready to go in the event that a hurricane does form. What normally happens is that the broker sends you a quote, you look through the details, and most people choose the cheapest quote. The most important thing at this point is to get the wording and the conditions of each insurance policy and read through the documents. Now, the document for my insurance was 13 pages. This is legalistic mumbo jumbo, which, while at this point you just want to go sailing, you have to read these documents. You have to know what the exclusions are, you have to know what's covered, and you have to know what they're not going to pay for, because one insurance company will have different exclusions from another insurance company. So clauses that are often included in exclusions are things like appropriate care and attention must be taken at all times, or appropriate seamanship has to be done or the claim will be void. And also reasonable measures or reasonable protection has to be put in place. So if you have specific concerns about what that means, you need to phone up the insurance company and ask them, or speak to your broker. So for example, when there was a cyclone bearing down on us in Queensland, Cyclone Debbie, it turned into a Category 5 hurricane. I was nervous about what the conditions were for them saying appropriate protection. So I actually phoned up the insurer, which was Pantanis, and they gave me very clear instructions to say what I could and could not do. As it turned out, what I was doing was going to be fine. I took it up into the mangroves, tied it up in the mangroves with about 50 different lines, and it was fine. As in, the boat was fine, it didn't get any damage, but a lot of other boats did. I'd also like to mention that the deductible for named storms in Australia on my previous boat was 30%. So 30% of the value of the boat would be lost to me if the boat went down in a named storm. Another story that I think is very important to know about is I had a friend who was cruising around Indonesia, and he put his boat on a mooring that he was paying for, went to the island overnight, I think it was, but certainly left the boat. During the night, a squall or a storm blew up, the mooring broke, the boat ran up onto the reef and was completely devastated and sunk, filled with water, and then cost considerable money to retrieve and had to be completely rebuilt. Because one of his exclusion clauses said the boat must be manned at all times, or words to that effect, while at anchor, they didn't pay out anything at all. So this was completely devastating for him. So I personally find that kind of clause completely unacceptable. There are always going to be times when you have to leave the boat to do shopping or things like that. So to have a clause in your contract that says an unmanned boat is not covered, I would be looking for another insurer. So another exclusion that is often used by the insurance companies is to have certain high value items that are only covered if they are in a lockable compartment. So phones, wallets, money, other valuables. So again, read your policy to make sure that if these items are listed and they have to be locked up, the insurance will not pay out for those items unless there was forced entry and the signs of a break-in. Now I want to talk about how much you should insure your boat for. And this isn't just about the boat itself, because that's usually what people focus on. You need to pay a lot of attention to the other elements in your insurance policy, because I believe it is very common to be underinsured and not actually be covering for everything that's on the boat, and that's certainly the case for us. So we took the insurance out when we just had the boat handed over to us, and we had certain items that were being fitted, so we added those onto the value. We got a price, we got the insurance, and then after that was all done, we then added in a few extra things. We put on extra gear, $9,000 dive compressor, dive equipment, and all that sort of stuff. Immediately there was extra costs in the boat that weren't covered. And then the standard personal property cover, I think, is usually offered at $20,000. Now you need to really look at all the gear that you've had and decide, is $20,000 enough for all of your gear? For example, we had 2 stand-up boards. They're worth about $800 and $900 each. We have multiple cameras, we have a few computers, we have clothes and good gear in all sorts of ways on the boat because we were living there. So if you're living on board and you have a lot of valuable clothes, valuable gear, we had all of our medical kit. I had a dermatoscope for looking at skin cancers worth $1,000. I had oroscopes and blood pressure machines and temperature guns, and plus all the medication we had, and really all of that was worth probably $5,000 alone. In retrospect, I really should have had that properly covered. If I'd sit down and worked out the value of all our clothes, the value of all of our medical gear, the value of our personal play toys, diving gear, fishing rods, scuba gear, etc., it came to way over the $20,000. You need to sit down and actually think very seriously about what will it cost you to replace all these things in the event of a total loss. Those sort of things are not going to impact your premium too much, and certainly if you're not happy with the liability amounts, that can be increased relatively cheaply as well. So give that some serious thought, guys. Don't just skim over it as most people do. Sit down and decide, are you properly covered? They're always going to have deductibles, and that is taken out of the value anyway. So you are never going to come up square. You're always going to have losses. By underinsuring, your losses are just hugely greater. So having mentioned deductibles, let's talk about that for a moment. The deductible is a percentage of the value insured or a minimum amount. So my deductible for the boat is 2% of the sum insured or $500. This is interesting because when I first skimmed through this at the beginning of the trip, I thought it was 2% of the claim, not 2% of the boat value. So for example, if I had a claim of $100,000, 2% of the boat value is $23,000. They will take out $23,000 out of the $100,000, so that becomes a deductible of close to 25%. So this is a huge impact on the money that's going to end up back in your pocket at the end of the claim. Now, the other thing to see on my policy here is that the windstorm deductible is 10%. So if I'm in a windstorm, which I presume means a named windstorm, and in the definitions it will state that. So if there's a named storm and my boat gets damaged, the deductible is 10%. The sum insured for my boat is $1.55 million. So if I had a claim during a windstorm, my deductible would be $155,000. So again, this is significantly increasing my losses. But of course, this is the way the insurers minimize or reduce their overall risk because of Hurricane Irma and all the increasing frequencies of cyclones and named storms that have been occurring in the last few years. So we're all, unfortunately, just paying a price for that. Now, if you also look at the other items, so the tenders are 10% of sum insured, personal property is 10% of sum insured. The 10% deductible on $20,000 is $2,000, and with all those other smaller things, there's $350 of deductible. So just running through the sums insured on my policy, I've got the value of the boat and equipment being $1.15 million. The tender is insured for $6,000. That was an estimate before I bought it because I thought it would cost about $6,000. It actually cost about $6,800. So the tender itself was underinsured. Personal property, $20,000. Medical payments, $10,000. Uninsured boaters. Now this is if somebody runs into you and does a hit and run, or if they just don't have insurance, this covers up to $100,000 of your damages from that kind of event. So that's nice to have in place, but it certainly doesn't cover major losses. The P&I insurance is $500,000 and pollution insurance is almost $1 million. and the premium I paid for this policy was $14,300. Because I'm not a US citizen, it was very hard to get insurance, and certainly none of the American companies would insure me. I had to go through the London insurers. I believe the American policies are a lot more favorable, so there are benefits for being with American insurers from what I can see. The people that I've talked to have a policy where if it's a total write-off, there's no deductible, which is absolutely fantastic. But for me, there is a deductible. For example, Americans can also get umbrella cover. So if there are claims that go outside of what you're covered for, and I think this relates specifically to third-party damage, then umbrella cover will also help pay for any excess claims. As I said before, we fitted extra equipment on the boat after I took out the policy, and if these amounts are significant, you can go back to your broker and ask them to upgrade the policy to cover those items, and you may have a slight increase in premium to pay. But I certainly think it is worth it if those costs are significant and you want to be covered completely for those extra things. Now, some of the other interesting things that are required of us when we take out insurance is that they put requirements on you when you're doing high-risk activities. So for example, when we were making the Atlantic crossing, we were going to be obligated to have on board extra crew, so it wasn't just the two of us, and we had to have somebody on board that had done an Atlantic crossing before. Those conditions are sometimes likely to be added to your policies, so make sure if you are going to be doing those sort of crossings that you read the policy to make sure you're complying with the requirements, because again, you don't want to be caught out and have the insurance not pay out because you didn't have that third or fourth person on board. Now, the other thing that is really, really important is questions like, if I have an accident, what do I do? If somebody comes to tow me away, how do I make sure that they don't get rights over the value of the boat? If a salver comes to you saying you need to sign this document, what steps do you need to put in place? Is it okay to sign the form or is it not? And how do you protect your own interests while still complying with what needs to be done to save your boat? While I've said you need to read the 13 or so pages in that document, you will get information about the steps you need to take in the event of an accident. For example, immediately take all possible steps to minimize the loss and protect the insured vessel. It's kind of logical, but if you don't take steps to save the boat from going down, they may not pay you out. That's the state. Failure to do so may invalidate your insurance coverage or reduce the amount of any claim that may be payable hereunder. As soon as possible, give us direct written notification of loss and its circumstances. Comply with any reasonable request made of you in regard to the loss. Cooperate with us in the investigation, defense, or settlement of any loss. Now, they do say, neither assume obligation nor admit liability without our expressed written permission to do so. So what they're telling you is, don't admit there's any fault, don't admit there's any liability until they tell you that it's okay to do so. And the rest of the conditions are pretty obvious. So in the event of an accident or a claim, the first thing to do is, first of all, protect life. You need to make sure the people are safe. The people come first. The next thing to do is to make sure the boat is protected in whatever way you can. And thirdly, as soon as you possibly can, get in touch with the insurance to let them know that there's been an accident or there's been an event. And in regards to this, from our experience, I would also recommend when you first get the policy back from your broker, look at the policy and discuss with the broker what are the emergency numbers you call in the event of something going wrong. So test out those numbers by giving them a call, making sure people answer them, and making sure you get through to somebody that can help you in the event of some kind of urgent situation that you have to deal with. In another episode, we're going to talk more about how to take action when a claim arises and those different processes down the track about liability, how to protect your asset, and how to not fall foul of people claiming salvage rights over your boat. So we need to get some expert advice on this, and I'll feed that to you at a later date. Okay guys, so I hope you found that useful. Thanks to everybody for all their support over the weeks. Make comments down below, especially if you have information about the recommendations for receiving help when you're offshore, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Let's make up a big bonfire on the beach with the the stars as our lighters and throw our problems in the flame.
If you have liked this episode, hit the like button, subscribe for free, and ding the dong so you don't miss your fix of the next exciting episode. Love and health from the Barefoot Doctors.
We're gonna get over this. I see the smoke in the mirrors. I'm holding the key, one step away from salvation.